If you've ever thought about investing in industrial real estate, my guest this week is a perfect example of someone who made the transition from owning residential investment properties to getting into industrial properties. He has an industrial engineering degree, so he had a little bit of background in it, worked as in the manufacturing industry for a while, and then ultimately bought a large industrial property, and he's actively looking to buy more. So we break down how he made the transition from residential into industrial investing, what he looks for right now in new properties he's looking to buy, and some advice that he'd give for new investors looking to get into the industry. We had a fascinating conversation. His name is Logan Hartle, a really good guy. You're going to get a ton of value from listening to him chat, and let's jump into it. Hey, Logan, thanks so much for joining me on the show.
Hey, Chad, thanks for having me.
So you got an awesome background, which I think a lot of people will be interested to hear more about, on how you were a residential real estate investor, and then you've transitioned into more in commercial and industrial. And I know you've got an industrial property right now, and you're pursuing sale leasebacks and also flex developments. So I guess maybe like right from the beginning, what was your experience on getting into residential, and then why did you decide to transition out of it into industrial?
Yeah, absolutely. So kind of take you back to the beginning. So I think like a lot of investors, I started my journey reading Rich Dad Poor Dad, and just kind of then it was off from there, right? You can't go back once you read that book, right? And so I was off like a shot, and then just could not stop reading investment books. My dad and my uncle were both very influential. They both had real estate holdings and residential side of things, not massive portfolios, but 20 units or so each. But both were very vocal about the benefits of real estate. So all throughout college, I was studying industrial engineering, primarily in the manufacturing sector, and just reading everything else I could about real estate. So I probably read more about real estate in college than I did about engineering in college. It was just more interesting to me. So it was funny. One of my professors right in college told me, he said, you need to go get your commercial real estate license right out of school. And I was like, no, that's fine. I'm going to be an investor and do all this other stuff. And here I am years later, I'm a commercial real estate broker. But yeah, so I was studying it. I got out, I started working, in college. I worked, as I said, in manufacturing. So I worked at Toyota for a little while in their engine manufacturing plant. I worked at Sea Ray Boats, which is a really cool, we were making 50, 60-foot yachts, really neat manufacturing facility there. Right out of school, I started working at a company called Technocap that made metal closures for food, pharmaceuticals, and cosmetics, big 250,000 square foot manufacturing facility. And that's when I started buying residential real estate. So I bought a duplex and then another duplex and then another duplex. About 5 years into my career, I had an opportunity with a couple of partners to buy a business. And that business was called the Warwood Tool Company. It was a hand tool manufacturer that made tools for the railroad industry and specialty, oil and gas tools, things like that. And so we bought that business with the real estate as well. Ran that for about 5 years, realized that I was terrible at it. And so I said, you know what, we need to give someone else the reins here. So we found a gentleman who had been working for 30 years or so at another company. We found a buyer and kind of connected those two. They ended up buying the business, and we ended up keeping the real estate and leasing it back to them. So that's kind of our jump into the industrial real estate world. Fast forward to 2020 of November, and my wife wants to move to Charlotte, and I say, okay, let's do it. Let's move to Charlotte. So I didn't want to handle the residential duplexes anymore. I was tired of fixing toilets and tenants complaining with neighbors and arguments and stuff like that. I was over it. Right. So I think the big push, there were a few podcasts I listened to and just kind of started to solidify this triple net lease, single tenant or multi-tenant, but triple net lease. Let's let the tenants take care of the property. And the more I heard it out, more I was just like, that's what I want. I don't mind handling negotiations of leases. I don't mind dealing with banks. I don't mind dealing with large, bigger picture stuff, but I don't want to fix your toilet. So I, the more I started digging in, the more I was like, well, you know what? I've got the background. I know everything about the buildings. I've spent 10 years in manufacturing. From a physical perspective, the buildings don't scare me. And I think a lot of people, that kind of scares them. They're worried about this asset class. So that kind of solidified it in my mind. And we ended up selling all the duplexes off and still have that manufacturing building. And now are, as you said, pursuing sale leasebacks and flex development with a few partners of mine.
So a couple of questions come to mind as you went through that story. And the first, I'll put you on the spot to see if you can remember, but do you remember what those podcasts were when you 2020 you're listening to?
Yeah, the one was Matt Onofrio. I might have messed up his name, but Onofrio on the Bigger Pockets podcast was talking about some of the FedEx distribution facilities that he bought. And then there was another one, I can't remember it, but it was someone was talking about triple net leases. And just singing the praises of not having to really do a whole lot. And I was like, well, great. That's awesome. I like that. So
yeah. And I think a lot of people can relate because Rich Dad Poor Dad was the first real estate specific book that I had read, even though it kind of was more of a global context. It still talked a lot about real estate. So that one was the one that sparked my curiosity as well. And on the podcast side, I know a lot of people are looking for material right now on where to find good content. So I'll put the link to that one that you mentioned, the Bigger Pockets one, in the description. And if you happen to remember the other one, just send me a note later and we'll tie that one in as well. Because I know people are always just looking for good information. And if Rich Dad Poor Dad was like the spark for you, and then these were the ones that kind of watered the plant and got you to where you are, I'm sure that people are going to want to check it out as well. And then the other part I had about that is, when you made the transition into industrial real estate, you said that you already had some comfort level on the building mechanics with your background in industrial design and working in that field. How did you couple that with the market dynamics itself? So you had a really good understanding of what the building was and how it functioned and how it suited certain users. But how did you extract all the market data, not having an extensive background at that time, into what the market actually was?
Yeah, I'm a bit of a nerd, so I'm an Excel nerd. I love Excel, and so go figure, engineer, right? So I spent, as I said, I spent probably just as much time researching real estate as I did engineering through school. So, I can't count how many articles and how many, self-taught courses, YouTube videos and stuff that I took on creating pro formas for properties or on due diligence and running due diligence for properties. So from the investment side of things on the front end, I guess just kind of self-taught. I think that's, I'm not saying I'm hyper successful, but when I look at people who are successful and I kind of want to emulate them, I think a lot of people don't wait around for information to come to them. They go find it, and they're self-taught. And so I've tried to adopt that as much as possible. So yeah, just a lot of self-learning, honestly. When I got to the brokerage that I'm at now, I'm very blessed to have some good mentors here as well, who have been doing this for a long time and have been in the game for a while. So, just soaking up as much information from them as I can. Other folks, I've probably watched every YouTube video that you have out there, but it's learning as much as you can. Through that, I spent a ton of time, I'm sure you do as well, in CoStar and every ounce of information I can pull together, I try to really understand my market in depth. But, when it comes to things like running comps and creating pro formas, just kind of learning that, kind of self-teaching myself, if you will.
You've said that better than I could possibly have tried to say it myself, is that to learn the commercial real estate and more specifically industrial real estate, there's no curriculum for it. You can't go to school and learn how to be an industrial real estate investor. I mean, you had some industrial background with your education, but it wasn't specifically on how to buy an industrial real estate investment. But what I loved what you said is that it is a journey where you have to be self-motivated and you have to seek out all those things, because there just isn't one book or there isn't one video that's going to teach you everything you need to know. It's a constant ongoing process. So I think that was very well said. I love that piece of advice that you'd have for other people as well. Is just that's what you have to do. It's a manually intensive process of just going out and learning as much as you can about it. So when you're looking now as an investor that has a big manufacturing facility under your belt already, you've got some experience in it, you know the market really well. What do you look for now in your future investments?
Yeah, it's going to kind of be, it depends. So on the sale leaseback side, it's a little less risky on the development side. Development's always potentially risky. So for the development side, we're looking for as much upside as we can. We want to look for places where the end lease rate is going to be as high as possible. We're trying to fit as many units as we possibly can in those flex spaces on that piece of land, so we can absolutely tap out our potential there. And then we're kind of reverse engineering that to compare that to our construction costs to see, is this going to make any sense? And you know, I'm no development expert. You know, I'm just to be 100% fair, we're learning this as we go. Just like we said, we're you know, we're putting offers in, we're talking to contractors, and we're flipping over rocks every day. But from the sale leaseback side, it tends to be a little bit less risky. You know, you're looking for somebody that wants to be there for 10 or 15 years. Still, they've been in that building for at least 10 years, 20 years, hopefully. And their business is very, very stable. So when it comes to the sale leaseback side of things, the tenant is as much, if not more important to me than the building. You know, we definitely don't want a building that's got a ton of environmental issues. We want to make sure it's a building that if that tenant were to leave, other tenants would like, you know, and likely use. So, you know, we don't want anything with 12-foot ceilings or really low ceiling heights. We want to get something that's, you know, it doesn't have to be 40 feet, you know, like some of the modern distribution facilities are. But, you know, if we can find something in that 18 to 20-foot range, I know we've got tons of tenants we could fill in that space with. So that's kind of what we're looking for. It's a building that to put it in very vague terms, a building that, you know, future tenants would want, a tenant that's got good financials and has been in business for 15 to 20 years, who wants to sign a 10 to 15 year lease back on that building.
Yeah, I think that's a very lucrative plan. When you're looking for opportunities like that, how are you sourcing them?
So it's kind of fortunate that I'm an industrial broker, so I spend all day talking to buyers, and I'm very open with buyers at the very beginning if it's one that might meet my criteria. You know, if I'm approaching them as a broker, you know, it's very important to be 100% upfront to say, hey, you know, I personally have interest in this property. So, you know, we're very quick and forward about that. But I do a lot of old school manual dialing. I do a ton of cold calling. I do a ton of cold emailing, reaching out to folks on LinkedIn. And it's been very manual, but it's been a process that has worked for me. I talk to some people and they hate cold calling. They only do social media platforms, or they only do direct mail. And you know, I would say if I'm giving advice to anybody out there who wants to prospect, is find what works for you, find what you're good at, and work it. If you'd asked me 10 years ago if I'd be good at cold calling, I'd tell you absolutely not. I'd be terrible at it, but it turns out I'm okay at it. So, you know, we use service called Reonomy. I don't know if you've used Reonomy or not. You can pull ownership data, and it's probably about, I would say it's 80 to 90% accurate on the address side of things. It's probably about 60 or 75% accurate on the phone number side of things, and then the emails are a shot in the dark. It would be kind of my you know, take on it, but I've actually had pretty good success with that. I do like to look the same folks up on LinkedIn to see if I can find them, to just kind of do a little bit more of a personal touch. Hey, how are you? Just touching base. And then it's usually just a phone call. So it's a phone call. Hey, I saw your property. I try to keep it as unsalesy as I possibly can. You know, hey, I saw your property. You know, have you ever thought about selling it? One of the ways that I actually approach them that tends to work better for me, if you don't mind, I'll kind of go into a little bit of a script there.
Yeah, I'd love to hear it.
So I typically ask people, when you call somebody, whether you're a broker or you're an investor, they tend to get a little defensive right off the bat if you're asking them to sell their property, because they get calls from a million brokers constantly. So I typically start off with asking them if they're looking to expand their portfolio. You know, that's, I'm trying to bring you value. I'm trying to bring you some off-market deals. I might have off-market deals that might fit them perfectly. So, so I usually start with that. Say, hello, is this John? Hey, John, this is Logan. I know you probably get 100 phone calls, and sorry, I'm calling you out of the blue here, but just wanted to call you about your property at XYZ. You know, I've got a few properties for sale that are kind of similar, and just wanted to know if you're looking for anything right now. No, we're not looking for anything right now. You know, we're kind of pretty well set where we are. Oh, okay, cool. Have you ever thought about trading that property? Well, you know, I don't know. The market's kind of hot right now. And so maybe, what do you think I could get for it? And then the conversation starts to go. So if it's one that I'm interested in, I'll say, well, you know, I would personally be interested, and here's the data I would need. Or, hey, you know, if I were to sell this property, one of my investors in our pool or out to the market, here's the data I would need. And so that's kind of the direction I take it. But yeah, that's that's as simple as I keep it.
Yeah, and the beauty of that script is that it is very simple. You're not coming across as being salesy like you mentioned some guys are. And when owners are getting inundated with calls all the time, they get pretty leery about taking another one. So I really like that script, and I think that underscores a really important point for investors that are looking for a sale leaseback, or really just like a good deal in general, is that they're hard to find. You can't just go onto LoopNet and expect to find a really good quality industrial property. And I'm sure it's the same in Charlotte as it is in my market and markets all over the world. A lot of these deals happen off market, or it's someone that's putting in the elbow grease to actually get this themselves. So I think that that's really important. If you're an investor, that you might just have to shake some trees yourself to see if you could find a property, or get a broker like yourself to assist you in that endeavor, and to give you an outline of what you're looking for. And then you've got a broker that's trying to find deals. But it's difficult to find a really good quality deal on a website.
It truly is. Yeah. And I didn't quite believe it. You've always heard that, but I didn't quite believe it until I started digging through and trying to get a hold of properties. As I said, you're kind of self-taught. You start crunching the numbers on these properties that are on LoopNet and out there on Correctseed. It's like, this just doesn't make sense. How are they going to sell this thing? And some of them sell, some of them don't. But as I started to dig through, it's like, holy cow, there's absolutely no way I would have gotten in front of the people I've gotten in front of without just picking up the phone and calling people. Yeah. And it works. It's labor intensive. And I think for most people, they hear cold call and they kind of throw up in their mouth a little bit and get scared and clammy hands, and they're just terrified. And so maybe that's not it. Maybe it's text messaging for you. Maybe it's email for you, but whatever it is, find something that you prospect every single day. I make sure that every single day I prospect for at least an hour, and every single day I'm in Salesforce and I'm following up with leads that I've set recurring follow-ups for at least like an hour. So it's that constant follow-up, constant reaching out to the market. And you'll spend a week or two where no one talks to you. You'll get hung up on, you'll get screamed at, you'll get yelled at, you'll get told never to call me again. And then somebody will say, yeah, I think you should list my property. And then you'll do a backflip and say, this is the greatest thing ever. Why don't I do this every day? And you'll go through that roller coaster. You will. So if you plan on cold calling or doing any sort of prospecting, just be ready. It's an emotional journey. So.
Yeah, I've said before, it's probably the most underappreciated task of being a broker, but it's also the task that has the biggest returns, because there's just not a lot of people that want to do it, but the value is immense in doing it. Whether you're doing it as a broker on behalf of someone else, or whether you're doing it as an investor, that's just how you can uncover some really, really good deals on that. That was some great insight. I really do appreciate you shining some light on that. What would you say to an investor who's considering getting into industrial real estate, and maybe a not too dissimilar of a situation from yours, but perhaps didn't have the educational or the work experience in industrial? So maybe they own a couple of houses right now and they really want to get into industrial real estate. What are you generally saying to people with that profile?
Yeah, I would say, it's probably wise to partner with somebody. It's probably wise to partner with somebody who's done it before. And maybe you've got let's say you have 3 houses and you're like, I'm going to sell these and I want to get into industrial, and theoretically you're going to sell those houses and make $100,000. Talk to that person. Say, if I brought $100,000 to the table, could I be a part of the deal and learn how you do it? Everybody's looking for more capital. Everybody's looking for capital for deals that they do find. And, they might be willing to bring you on. You're going to learn the ins and outs of it. If you don't want to go with partners, definitely get a broker that knows what they're doing, who can walk you through this process and can show you the ins and outs of it, because there are some nuances to the industrial space, as you know, and I know that they're going to want to know. It's very, very different from a single family house. So just make sure you surround yourself with professionals who have done it before, because if you buy a house and you find out the roof is bad, it might be a $10,000, $12,000 fix. If you buy a 50,000 square foot warehouse, that could be, depending on where you're at, $75,000, $100,000, $150,000 fix that you didn't anticipate. And so if you don't have that capital set aside, you may be in trouble. So, and that's just on the physical side of things. There are nuances when it comes to the lease. If there is a tenant involved, there are nuances. You're going to be dealing with environmental studies on the front end where there might be environmental issues with the building. So just make sure you have somebody in your corner who's been there, done that, who can walk you through that process.
Yeah, and I'd piggyback on that and emphasize the importance of what you're saying with just, you either need to have somebody that's done it or can help you get there, whether it's a partner or a broker, but you need to really understand what industrial real estate is, what the limitations are, how a building might have some functional obsolescence. You mentioned like a 12-foot ceiling being a perfect example. If someone didn't know better and they bought an industrial building that maybe had a tenant in there for a few years, but it's 12-foot ceilings, if that tenant leaves, it could be very difficult finding another tenant. So I'm a big supporter of everything that you're saying, is that you need to really understand what you're buying, and that takes time. It's whereas everyone kind of has like an intuitive sense of what like residential real estate investing is, industrials, I wouldn't say it's at a whole nother level. It's just a different game, and most people just don't have that familiarity with it. So it takes time and it takes patience, but I love everything you're saying, because I say the exact same thing to people on that as well.
Yeah.
I wanted to transition over to a book project that I know you've been working on. I just wanted to get an update on that, because I'm waiting eagerly to read the books. I just want to hear where that one's at.
Yeah, so I am writing a book. It's a book on industrial real estate deals. It's called 10 Deals. And it's going to be a book on 10 different investors and the journey they've taken through an industrial deal they've done, good, bad, or indifferent. And so I am still collecting the final few. So if anybody is listening to this and would like to have a deal that they have, promoted in the book, please feel free to reach out to me after this. But yeah, so we're gathering our last several candidates for this, and I'm hoping to release the book in the first half of 2022. I'm actively writing, and as I'm writing, I'm realizing that I need an editor, somebody who can come in and help me. My writing is okay, but it's not up to par where I would like it. My wife is standing over my shoulder, shaking her head half the time, like, "What are you doing?" So she'd be a good one. She's a very good writer. I'm not. So, but no, I'm okay. But yeah, the book's going to be something that I think, I always learn best through stories, right? And so for me, when I read a story, when I'm reading a bullet pointed list of here's what to do in real estate, it's like, okay, cool, that's a cool quick hitter. But when I read a story about, hey, this is Tom went to this property, he made an offer, here's what happened, it fell apart, he went back and did this, he offered this way, and then you read about Tom's journey through that process, I always learn better that way. And I'm sure there's a lot of people out there who do as well, and want to see the real life application about what we're talking about here and how that actually looks in going through a real estate transaction. So that's the impetus behind the book. It's kind of a book that I wish I had. And so that's why I want to write it. So that's where we are.
Yeah, I'm sure you've noticed along your journey, as have I, that there's just so little information out there for people wanting to learn about industrial real estate. So I think that there's a big need in the market for material like this, because the few books that I have read on industrial real estate, you're right, it's more academic on these are the things you should look for. Whereas I'm just like you, I get more value from hearing about like a mistake that a guy made and how that shaped how he'll look at things differently, or a success story about how a guy turned a mistake into a successful investment. So I'll be one of the first people that order that book as soon as it's out. So that's thank you for writing that. I'm looking forward to reading it. I guess one last thing I want to close on, and that's the network mastermind group that you've done, which I had the privilege of speaking at one time. Are you still actively doing that right now? And is that a group that other people can apply to join?
Absolutely. Thank you. Thank you for bringing that up. Yeah. So the True Commercial Real Estate podcast is a podcast and networking group that we put out. So once a month, we do a live podcast. Essentially, we host, or somebody comes along and we interview them, just like this. Chad came on our show. We interviewed him, and then we have guests. There might be 15 or 20 people who join that podcast as well. And at the end of the podcast, they get a chance to ask questions to the guest as well. So that's usually the first week of the month. And then the third week of the month, we have just a straight up networking group. So, and it's basically a mastermind. People come, and there's anywhere from 5 to 25 people, depending on the week. But yeah, we are actively looking for people to join that networking group if they want to do it. It's a group of people who are specifically focused on the commercial real estate world. Kind of a little caveat to that, we don't talk about multifamily. The impetus behind the group was there are so many commercial real estate groups that you go to, and they only talk about multifamily, and they're great and they're awesome for multifamily, but we kind of got tired of going to those groups and saying, hey, what about office buildings? What about industrial? What about retail? What about these other things that no one was really talking about? So so far during the group, we've talked about industrial with Chad. We've talked about medical office. We've talked about triple net leases, single tenant triple net leases. We've talked about self-storage. We interviewed Bridger Pennington on raising a fund. And it's just been a great show. Hunter Thompson's coming on the next podcast. We're going to interview him in October about raising funds as well. So it's been, if you're interested in that type of content, it's a fun show, and it's a really good group of people who just love real estate. And to be honest, they're just normal people. So everybody that's come on the group's been great, on the podcast, has been great. All of our guests are, and all of our members are great. And there's normal people going through life, trying to grow their net worth through real estate and networking with each other. So if you're interested, True Commercial Real Estate Podcast, we got a YouTube channel, and you can connect with me. And I'm happy to connect you in the group.
Yeah, and I can attest to the quality of the people in that group, because after we did the interview, I stuck around after just to chat with a few people, and I had some great conversations and connected with a few people on LinkedIn after it, and just a really solid group of guys. So I commend you for that as well. You've done so much for the industry in terms of your future book coming out and having networking groups like this, and being a content creator yourself. So I really do value you just as a content creator and as a guy yourself. What if someone wanted to reach out to you, and I know you're active on LinkedIn, so I'll put some links to your company and yourself in there. What markets are you working in as a broker if someone wanted to hire you to represent them as well?
Yeah, so our brokerage is in North and South Carolina right now. So primarily in the Carolinas. We do have buyers who ask us to help them buy property in other states. And so, we can't necessarily list there, but in a lot of commercial real estate world, it's a little bit different from the resi world where you can do single transactions for your buyers. There's certain paperwork for that, and that's kind of the boring side of it. But anyways, as far as listings go, we primarily work in the Carolinas.
Sounds good. So I'll put links to everywhere that I can on you. If you happen to remember those podcasts as well, shoot me a link and I'll include that in the show notes. And look forward to that book coming out. I really do. And hope to keep in touch down the road here as well.
Absolutely. I appreciate it, Chad. This has been great.
Thanks, Logan. Appreciate it, man. One of the things I've noticed with all successful industrial real estate investors is they all have a passion and a zeal for this industry. And you could certainly see that with Logan. He's so passionate about the industry and knowing and learning as much as he can about it. And I get a ton of value listening to guys like that chat. And I hope you did as well. I've got a number of more interviews scheduled for the fall here with similar types of guests who are either industrial real estate investors or have some deep knowledge on the topic. So if you want to follow along more, please consider subscribing, and I'll catch you in the next video. Thanks.